Joining us for more on that is Ashraf Shannon, our correspondent in the besieged Gaza Strip, and also Mazen Qamsiyeh, Palestinian scientist and author from the holy city of Bethlehem. Gentlemen, welcome. Ashraf, if I could start with you, we're seeing the more powerful resistance movements in the besieged Gaza Strip playing a much more greater role now in the resistance, this new resistance over the past 2 years in the occupied West Bank. What more can you tell us?
Well, Wissam, over the past few years, we've seen an increase in the might of Palestinian resistance when it comes in defending the Palestinians against Israeli attacks. We've seen increase of rocket capability and great improvements in the range of domestically made rockets. And this is and also the failure of Israel's so-called Iron Dome system and David Sling to intercept these rockets. And this is a sign, as Mr. Haniyeh was talking about, the weakness of the Israeli regime militarily. When you see the multi-billion-dollar system like the Iron Dome or David Sling failing to intercept domestically made rockets from the besieged Gaza, this shows how weak the Israeli regime military is becoming. Israel has for decades attacked Palestinians, and over the last 10 years carried multiple wars against Gaza. But the Palestinian resistance did not fail. It's quite the opposite. They increase their power, they increase their preparedness, and oftentimes force the Israeli regime to beg for truce in order to stop the ongoing military aggressions against Gaza.
Right. Let's turn to Mazen. Mazen, Israel once upon a time assassinated the former Secretary General of Lebanon's Hezbollah, Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, his wife and his child, their child, in a car from the air. And that was the start of Israel, the start of the end of Israel's occupation of Lebanon. We heard from the Hamas leader, Haniyeh, that Ismail Haniyeh, that the same with the Gaza Strip. The assassination campaigns made the resistance in Gaza stronger and led to Israel's withdrawal from the besieged Gaza Strip. Now we're seeing Israel beginning to assassinate an assassination campaign in the occupied West Bank. What can that mean for the Israeli occupation in the occupied West Bank?
Well, what we see here is an escalation by the regime against targets that they consider are important, and one of those targets is the civilians. Yes, occasionally they will kill some resistance people, but most of the people they kill are civilians, and this in itself is a sign of the weakness of the regime, because it cannot get at the resistance forces that are growing all over the Middle East, not just in Palestine itself. This is one aspect, but the other aspect that I find interesting is the way the Israeli government, which is the most right-wing government, has unleashed its settlers as a proxy for its actions. So when they commit pogroms, like in the village of Tormosaiya and Betin and others, and they are killing people, civilians. They're torching cars, dozens of cars, homes have been burnt. There's also a sign of weakness, because these settlers are under the direct supervision of this regime. So clearly the regime is getting into what's called the revenge mode, or a mode of tribalism. This mode of tribalism is not a sign of rationality, it's a sign of desperation, it's a sign of weakness, because ultimately, I mean, any rational human being looking at this will say, when you kill civilians, that does not make people less amenable to fight back. It will make them more amenable to fight back. So I think there's an issue for the Israeli government that it's desperate and it's resorting to basically increased war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Okay. Mazen, do you see the fact that Israel is now, since the Second Intifada in 2003, we can say, for the first time has used an Apache helicopter in Jenin, and is now using drones to assassinate Palestinians from the sky? Is that, can we say that means that the ground offensive that Israel has been conducting for the past 2 years, its assaults and its raids against Palestinian towns, especially Jenin, has failed?
Yes, indeed. What is happening in the West Bank is basically like in the early stages of the inability to enter Gaza. They resort to these actions. So when Gaza became basically area very hard for the Israeli army, infantry or even tanks in, this is happening here now in places like Jenin. It's remarkable that they were able to attack a convoy of Israeli armies that is entering in the middle of Jenin, and they put improvised explosive devices. This shocked the Israeli establishment, the Israeli military establishment, and I think it forced to now think about a Gaza, quote-unquote, Gaza solution for the West Bank, which is to besiege the cities and try to bomb them. Now, the next stage in development of that would be like what happened in Gaza, which is, of course, the resistance will be able to find ways to get rockets developed in homemade rockets or other, and this will escalate the situation. I think the Israeli army and its planners, they already foresee that, and they're trying to prevent it. But as I said, they are not rational, and the only rational thing that people can do in such situations is to follow logic. I mean, what Ismail Haniyeh, whether one agrees with him or does not agree with his movement as a movement, Hamas, with certain ideology, Ismail Haniyeh has some logic when he says this is not going to work for Israel, and the best thing for Israel to do is to step back and implement human rights and justice for the Palestinians. This is the only way, There's no other alternative, basically, to prevent large-scale conflict, which, of course, harms us as Palestinians, and we don't want that.
No.
Also,
Yeah.
the economy, there's high-tech industry, and
right. Mazen, can we say that we are reaching an era now in the West Bank where the more force the Israeli regime uses against the Palestinians, the more powerful the Palestinian resistance becomes? And this is a resistance that's only 2 years, that was only emerged 2 years ago, and is growing day by day. And as you said, some are under the illusion or delusion that they can still hold talks with a regime that is ethnically cleansing them, and at the same time they are still dreaming about this two-state solution.
I think we are reaching that stage that you described, not only in Palestine, but globally. People are seeing that invading other countries, like happened with the US in Iraq, produces counter forces and produces counter results to their expectation, as happened in Iraq, as happened in Syria, as has happened in Yemen, in many other countries. Force by an aggressor is not a way to get the aggressor's will imposed on the people. This is the stage that I think there's a global understanding of it, and I think more and more people see it. And it is, partially due, of course, to the effect of the resistance, but it's also partially due to the stupidity and the missteps and miscalculations by the oppressors, thinking that they can impose their will on the whole world.
Okay. Mazen, thank you very much. Mazen Qamsiyeh is a Palestinian scientist and author joining us from the holy city of Bethlehem in the occupied West Bank. We also had our correspondent from the besieged Gaza Strip, Ashraf Shannon,